In a major U.S. policy shift, President Donald Trump said on Tuesday he would order the lifting of sanctions on Syria at the behest of Saudi Arabia's crown prince.
They've had their share of travesty, war, killing, many years. That's why my administration has already taken the first steps toward restoring normal relations between the United States and Syria for the first time in more than a decade.
Trump made the surprise announcement at the start of a tour of Gulf Arab states that began in Saudi Arabia. A sanctions reprieve would be a huge boost for Syria's Islamist president and former al-Qaeda commander Ahmed al-Sharaa, who was looking to stabilize a country shattered by more than a decade of civil war. The White House and two Syrian presidential sources said Trump is set to say hello to Sharaa on Wednesday in Saudi Arabia. Trump said he made the decision after discussions with Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman and Turkish President Tayyip Erdogan, whose governments have both strongly urged the lifting of sanctions.
Now it's their time to shine. It's their time to shine. So I say good luck, Syria. Show us something very special.
The United Nations, which has been pushing countries to lift sanctions on Syria, welcomed the move.
It was important for us to see relief on sanctions on Syria.
The U.S. imposed sanctions during Bashar al-Assad's rule. The sanctions cut Syria off from the global financial system and deterred foreign investment and trade, hampering efforts to rebuild from the war. Damascus residents celebrated Trump's decision. It feels like a mountain has been lifted off our chest, said this local. Trump's announcement comes despite Israel's deep suspicion of Sharaa's administration. Israeli officials have continued to describe Sharaa as a jihadist. Sharaa was, for years, the leader of al-Qaeda's official wing in the Syrian conflict. He first joined al-Qaeda in Iraq, where he spent 5 years in a U.S. prison.
I will be ordering the cessation of sanctions against Syria in order to give them a chance at greatness.
There wasn't a lot of discussion about this happening right before his trip. It wasn't clear if he was going to meet with al-Sharaa or not during this trip to the Middle East. But I don't think it's necessarily that surprising aside from the abruptness of it. It wasn't telegraphed in advance, but it's now been almost 6 months that Sharaa has been in charge of Syria, and the sanctions were on the old regime. So Syria has been under sanctions for decades, of various sorts. But the most recent round of sanctions that the United States put on happened during the Arab Spring uprisings after Bashar al-Assad began brutalizing his own people in response to their uprising against his regime. And since those sanctions were put on, the United States has this habit of putting sanctions on and never quite taking them off. There's a humanitarian reason to want the sanctions to be lifted, which is that the people of Syria have suffered under the sanctions. They've suffered from natural disasters in the past few years. There was an earthquake not very long ago, and levels of poverty are extremely high. one of the biggest industries is the one of the biggest industries is the drug trade in Captagon, which isn't good either. So if you want Syria to be able to make it as a country and not fall apart into a renewed civil war, it makes sense that you would want sanctions to be lifted and to have a chance to work with Syria's leaders to try to bring that about. The president should also be cautious, like the United States should be cautious too, because you don't want to go whole hog in and invest in any particular regime, because even though they've stayed for 6 months, there's no guarantee that they're going to continue beyond 6 months, right? What we saw in Syria is truly a revolution, right? A new regime came to power that wants to reorder society in a fundamental way. It's not going to be a dynasty the way that it was under the Assads. And anytime that happens, there's so much sort of at stake and so much up in the air that things can change in really unpredictable ways.
وسقط بشار سقط نظام الأسد